Hello, everyone. I welcome you to another learning workshop. In our session today, we shall learn how to set boundaries with difficult people. If you are following this series, you may have by now seen other videos which spoke on burnout, how setting boundaries at work can help us prevent burnout. Also, understanding a bit about what really is burnout, what are some of the likely symptoms that can indicate we need support because we are going through a burnout at work. This particular session, we shall deep dive into how can we set boundaries with difficult people, because even though we all have um, a kind of invisible boundary, specifically at work, that's the professional boundary that we all carry. Sometimes with difficult people, it becomes a little tricky to really manage these boundaries. So let's look at some of the ways that we can counter it. These are simple techniques that you can apply, and it's not in a sequence, it's just that what really suits you best, you can implement it. Let's get started. Let's spend a minute here to first understand the difficult people in our lives. So, who do you consider a difficult person? Sometimes it can be a demanding boss who is crossing your boundaries or disrespecting you. It could be an insincere friend manipulating you, a toxic supervisor who's very, very political and manipulative, or a coworker. Regardless of the case, a difficult person is a bully, a gossip, or passive aggressive person who lack empathy. They will push your buttons, stress you out, and are draining to be around. When you meet such people who not only are disrespectful of your boundaries, but are stressing and draining you out, it becomes very tricky, specifically at workspace, to deal with them. Now, how do we manage them? Well, one of the most important things that we all often forget and may perhaps are not aware of is that in boundary crossing, trespassing, or being disrespectful, the oftentimes what we have seen is the behavior which is often the problem and not the individual. When we attempt to set boundaries with difficult people, this foundational shift in your mind, where you understand that it is always about the behavior and not the person, can bring in a profound shift in the way you look at the whole issue from a different perspective. Because remember, friends, difficult behavior isn't always intentional or permanent. People behave poorly when they are under stress, or they are experiencing some kind of loss or trauma, or perhaps even all three of it. So it's not really that people every day decide and go into and try to disrespect someone, which is not really the case. Maybe they're having a bad day, and it also could be that they are under a completely different stress or trauma that they are going through, which is making them behave the way they are behaving. Now, adapting this attitude of where we are more emphasizing on the behavior and considering the behavior as the problem and not the individual is a very matured way of looking at the whole thing, which then helps you establish your boundaries with difficult people and also give you the power to deal with them in a most effective manner. So the first thing is you have to change your perspective the way or the lens through which you look at these difficult people. Next, we will start with identifying the problematic behavior. Now, how would you do that? So let's say you have a scenario or an experience wherein your co-worker or your boss has disrespected your boundaries or have crossed that. One of the ways when you stay focused to their behavior, the problematic behavior, is you take some time off, sit down, and make a note of it. When you are trying to make sense of the behavior, what really happens. So when you write the whole incident and next to that create a column and say the problematic behavior, give this as a title to the next column, and just describe the problematic behavior rather than the individual. While you're doing this, you will be surprised to the insights you will get, because oftentimes this is so closely connected that we may not really be viewing the person in such a distinct way and with such clarity. We often start to hate the person and have other views generated for them basis on our thought process. But when we really sit down, and one of the first ways of dealing with a difficult people, establishing your boundaries here is, you can look at a scenario where perhaps, let's say, you are having real difficulty with someone particular in your office. You can in fact do this even for your personal relations, but for both, you have to find yourself a place and sit down and just draw two columns. In first, you write your entire experience of what is really happening, why you feel your boundaries are crossed or you have been disrespected. Then, once you write the whole incident, next to that column, you write from that incident, what was the problematic behavior that occurred. You're not going to write about that individual for now. And once you do that, you can then identify that specific behavior you are finding it problematic. So this is the first step, or one of the most powerful ways of identifying those specific behaviors, because identification is half the problem solved. Once you know what really is causing that behavior, then we move to the next step, which is we manage our inner self. This is the manage stress response, meaning for so far we were looking outward. So we recall that incident. Next column we wrote, the first column we wrote the whole negative experience where our boundaries were crossed. The next column we wrote the problematic behavior, specific problematic behavior from that incident. Now we move inward. Here, why we are moving inward is, the reality is that in our life, we may not really be able to control people externally. And at office, people have authority. They are at senior levels, they have got titles and power. So we can't really go on correcting them, or in a way treating them or conveying it to them the way the boundaries are disrespected and we don't want it this way. What we can actually do is manage the stress response, which is where we move inward. Now, when you move inward, you understand, first thing is, how much control do you have in that given situation of the problematic behavior you have written. So for example, you are into, let's say, a performance appraisal meeting, and your boss, who's a little mean, is giving you a feedback which may not really has to be that rude and laced with sarcasm and all sorts of things. However, he's doing that. Now, you cannot hold his collar, you cannot fight, you cannot yell and shout, which you even cannot do in certain relations in your personal space. Similarly, you can't do that in office. But he's a difficult person. He is someone who just don't get it. So, how do you deal with that? Now, one way is you went back, you wrote the whole thing. The next column, you wrote the problematic behavior. Maybe the problematic behavior here is his tone, his whole body language, and the way he used sarcasm, or he's misusing his authority. That's the behavior. The person, his, if we remove the person and just look at that behavior, the tone, managing stress response here is where we're understanding what I can do about it. So we move inward and then look at this person as how much control do you hold on that person's tone? If he has a rude tone, and which he usually often use in office space, he's little loud and he often communicate that way, a bit aggressive. What can you do about it? So manage stress responses, you are understanding to what extent you hold control, and then what can you do about it. So you are managing your own response through focusing on your inner state of calm. So in this scenario where you do not have actually a lot of control, the very first thing you could do is focus to make sure you stay in a calm state. Now, when our boundaries are transgressed and disrespected, it may not come to us naturally. We get into that stress mode. So the idea here is use the most easiest and the most effective technique to focus on your inner state of calm so that you deal with it the right way. What is that? That is using the breath work. So when you feel stressed, overwhelmed, a small pause and two inhalations through your nose and a deep exhale through the mouth will activate your parasympathetic nervous system and get you into a relaxed mode. This is what is gifted to us in our body by our breathing function. And this is something we all have handy. It is just that we need to remember, take that time and breathe. Just simple 3 deep breaths, 5 deep breaths, 1 deep breath. You get, you prevent yourself actually, your body from getting into a stress mode, and you get into a calm state so that you are better equipped to deal with things which are beyond your control. That's the second one. Third, you have to identify your limits. Specifically, as we are talking about workspace, dealing with people were difficult, and establishing boundaries, we also need to identify our limits. So we saw the person's specific behavior from the incident. Then we looked at it from a perspective where we are um, more paying attention to the problematic behavior, not to the individual. Next, we look inward, we try to calm ourselves. One of the easiest way to do that is the breath work. Now, finally, we identify our limits, just that we identified to what extent we control things. Identifying a limit can be done through this one simple question that can help you um, get a grip on the whole situation. So, try to answer this question for yourself. How much personal space do you need? What feels healthy and what feels comfortable? So this may vary with each one of us because each one of us are different situations where our boundaries are crossed over. Each one of us can use this question and apply it in our given scenario. The answers will help you make your next move. One other thing that I've added here is intentional pause. This is something I have used, friends, and I'm telling you, sharing this with you from my own personal experience. This has helped me a big time. I was into the space of being totally burnt out on account of my lack of usage of boundaries. And this particular method, even though breath work I have started doing in the past 2 years, but intentional pause is something if breath work do not come to you immediately, you can leave the place. When you find that your boundaries are transgressed, whether you are in your personal space or professional, whether you are in a situation where you find yourself, the next reaction that will come to you may not be correct, you need an intentional pause. Remember this. You can take a break, go to the washroom, go to the nearby balcony, just leave that place for a few seconds. You can say, I need a bio break, or if it is possible, you're at home, like you're working remotely, you can say, I'll come back to you. Give me a few minutes, I'll come back to you. Or you can give an excuse, I have another call, let me come back to you. This intentional pause of any reason that you can add and create this intentional pause will help you a big deal, and the other person as well. So wherever possible, use this. I know sometimes we may not really be in a position to use this intentional pause. We can't really leave that place. Well, in that case, my friend, you can use breath work. Just be yourself. Take one deep breath is good enough for you to recenter, get into a calm state, and then take the next step. Our body is designed in such a way that the moment you are agitated and stressed, you may react very differently. And the moment you take one deep breath, you are calmed down. May not be 100%, but out of a scale of 1 to 100, if you are stressed out, you will be 30% with one single breath into a calmer state, and you can better operate. But this comes with practice. Remember this and practice it. Finally, we also have the I statements through which we can rehearse. When I say rehearse, what I mean here is dealing with difficult people may not come to us impromptu, like on the spot, we cannot. It's a practice. You have to learn to deal with it. You may not really be able to deal with it the very first time, but when your boundaries are crossed and disrespected, specifically with those difficult people who has more authority above you, who can easily manipulate, and you are a no match to their politics and toxic behavior, then when you're learning to deal with them, you have to, in the background, do your homework. You won't be prepared overnight, but you have to do your homework. And that is the reason why you may have to rehearse, where you practice beforehand. One of the ways you could do is using the I statements. So I statements have found to be the most um, effective ways of boundary setting. These are also called boundary setting statements, and use them whatever style feels natural for you. These are assertive statements that communicate your needs without over explaining them. And they're very powerful, very, very powerful. So you can see on the screen the various examples I have given. You may just have to rehearse. Maybe you knowing this and rehearsing can help you re-say the same thing, communicate it back when you find yourself again with that same person in a difficult situation. The formula for effective I statements is this. You can make a note of it and apply it to your case. Wherever you find that difficult person, you can use this formula, rehearse it, and use it with such people, which will then help you really keep your boundaries intact and convey this message to that person, that how You respect your own boundaries and of theirs. Now, why these I statements? I statements are why they are so powerful and effective, because first of all, the I statements are taking the ownership away from the person who's offending your boundaries to you. You take ownership, and it is you who's taking the complete responsibility. So when you say, I failed, I'm not available right now, or all this I, it is also called non-defensive communication. And it has been found through research that when we take ownership and establish boundaries, so you're not telling the other person, you know what, you've crossed my boundaries, I'm not going to listen to you. But you begin with I. The I, beginning with that I felt this way. I don't like it. I am not available, is a non-defensive where the ownership is moved away from the person to you. That's one. Second, you own your power. You have not given away your power to the person. You own it. It has emotional honesty. And you take responsibility with your own boundaries. So you are conveying it with so much honesty, emotional honesty, and with so much responsibility that it automatically makes the other person non-defensive. Try this and you will be surprised that even the most difficult and bullying person might mellow down before you when you talk in the I statement. This you can even apply in your personal space, because I statements are non-defensive. Remember this. And these are the most assertive ones. And with that I, we are also claiming our power. When we use this I, it also gives the person that this person is talking from confidence. We are not acting like a victim. There is no self-pity. There is no such behavior where we are telling ourselves, poor me, poor me. No, we are taking owners of our thing, our power. And we are speaking from our power, from our authentic, powerful space. So use these statements, and you can use it with anyone, regardless of which level you are in your organization and in your personal space. And you will find that nobody can dare ever cross your boundaries. It's a very effective way. Try this. This one is an example where, of what we just spoke. Uh, just a second. So here's, you remember the problematic behavior, the specific behavior we've pulled out from a scenario where somebody has crossed your boundaries. This is just an example from the work that I've been reading. I've put these as examples so that you get an idea of how would you write it. Then these are the specific limits and boundary statements. So these are your limits. You set these limits for yourself. And then this I is where you focus on. These are not the I statements basically. These are the limits and the statements that you could add. Limits you set for your own self, and how you convey that either through intentional pause, you do the breath work, or you use the I statements. And using these examples, this is just for reference. You can feel free to create your own. This is just for reference in case you want to refer how you write the problematic behavior and your limits. Finally, friends, boundaries can be effectively set, but with difficult people, it can be challenging. And you may likely experience resistance and pushback. However, if difficult people, with all these methods that we've just learned, we apply them regardless of how difficult they are, they will understand if you assert your needs and limits firmly and respectfully. So far, We learned about burnout and boundaries. And I really thank you for being with me here watching all these series. If these lessons on burnout and boundaries resonated with you and you're still unsure how to apply them to your own work life, I'm offering a free one on one clarity call where we'll talk about what's been draining you, where your boundaries are slipping, and what you can start doing differently, gently, without guilt, and in a way that fits who you are. If you're ready to stop just surviving your workday and start feeling more in control and at peace, you can click the link below to book your free call. I'll be honored to walk this next part of the journey with you. Thank you.